everybody. Welcome to another Senturus webinar. Welcome, everybody, to another webinar from Senturus. Today, we're going to be doing super helpful features in Cognos 12 you may not know about. Here's our agenda. We are looking at first some introductions, and then we are going to talk about local file bursting, multiple gateway configurations, parameters. Ooh, this is a cool one. Replacements for Query and Analysis Studio, and then we'll come on back with About Senturus and some Q&A. Before we get things started, we have a couple polls for you today. All right, we got a couple polls. We're going to go ahead. The first one here is, what version of Cognos Analytics are you running? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start that first one. I'm going to let it run for about a minute. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop this first poll. Let's take a look, see what we got here. As soon as I can find the right window, there it is. So, as expected, the majority of you are on 11.1 or 11.2, which leads us, of course, to our next poll and our next question. So here you go. You can all see this. Take a look at that. Why? What's preventing you from upgrading? So, let's go ahead and let's see what your answer is here. What's stopping you from upgrading? It is the net, Alex. So Alex asked the question, is 12 the next version after 11.2? It is the, yes, 11.2.4, I believe, was the last 11 version, and then it went to 12. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Everybody take a look at this. So very interestingly, a lot of you are unable to upgrade due to IE. That's interesting. And that's fair, Varun. We should have had an option for upgrade plan for later. And Sailorman, don't have a first name there. Yeah, I can see how the Query Studio and Analysis Studio issue can be an issue for some folks. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to talk about that today. So speaking of who we are, all right, political Mario, can't help you with that. We can help you with a lot of stuff, but we can't help you with that. All right, so who are we talking today? Well, first off, over on the right there, that's me. That's me. That's me looking good, looking sharp, looking clean. All right. That's me, Pat Powers, BI trainer and consultant. You may have heard me before on some of these webinars. But over on the left, there's our main speaker of the hour here, Todd Schumann, our practice lead for installations, upgrades, and tuning. 10 years. 10 years Todd has been with us doing all these upgrades and doing all these things. So Todd is going to take you through the demos, take you through all the stuff. I'm going to sit here and just look good. I'm going to stare at you with those eyes. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Todd, and I'm going to shush up for a while. Todd, it's all yours.
All right. Thanks, Pat, for that great intro. I'm going to jump right into it today. I got a lot to cover, so I want to make sure we have enough time. So I'm going to go over a couple of the newer, I say new features. I mean, like, some of these features have been around in previous versions of Cognos. Some of them, like especially this one, bursting local file system, has been around, but haven't really done anything about it in any of my webinars. And I know just working with different customers, a lot of people aren't taking advantage of this. So I wanted to kind of just highlight this functionality in Cognos. So with Cognos Analytics, assuming you're on-premise, this is going to be just for on-premise customers only. This is restricted and not available in the cloud because they don't want you messing around on their file system. So if you've got an on-premise instance of Cognos, you can turn this on. So again, listed not just Cognos 12, available since Cognos 10. There's just a couple steps involved in how you set this up. The first thing is to define a local root folder that's Cognos going to write to, and you can either do it a drive or a folder on your Cognos server, or you can map it to a network drive. Once you've got that connection established, you're going to let Cognos define some subfolders, and you can create as many of these as you need. So you can have one for all the different departments in your company, you know, AP, payroll, HR, whatever you have, you know, you can create these and they can all have their own security. And then once you've got the folders defined, you can go ahead and schedule your reports to actually write down Excel, PDF, CSVs, whatever you need directly to that file system. And people can go and get reports without having to log into Cognos. They've already been generated on a schedule. They've already created the correct output, and it can be secured just through Windows folder security. One other nice thing you can do if you want to take it next level is you can also add scripts to do some additional functions like move these files elsewhere. As people have, FTP, copy to SharePoint, all kinds of things you can do once you've kind of generated these local files. So the first step I mentioned is to define that root folder. It's a bit buried. So if you're familiar with Cognos configuration, the tool, it's in the actual action bar. There's a thing under there called Edit Global Configuration. And you're going to go in there and it's going to open up a little window and you need to define the location file system root. And it's a little bit cryptic here as well. You have to kind of follow the format as to how you define your drive. And there's a little tech note below it in the properties that kind of can help you. But essentially, if you use the screenshot I have here for a local file, so it's file : 2// and then the drive. So in my case, it's an E in a report called Cognos Reports I created. If you're going to use a network drive, it's that same beginning of that file : 2// and you use the backward slash and kind of map out the network server and folder. A couple things to note: if you're going to use a network drive, you need to make sure that Windows service account that's running Cognos also has read-write capabilities to that folder. So Cognos needs to be able to obviously access it and also be able to write and create content in that folder. And then finally, the last step to do is, once you've got that in and it's connected, restart Cognos for that to actually take place. Once you've got that, the next step is to define your subfolders. So you're going to go into the admin console, which again still has the old Cognos 10 look and feel here. And under the configuration main tab, and then the dispatchers and services sort of sub tab there on the left, you can go and there's a little icon in the top right corner. It's got like a folder and two little like subfolders, directories kind of coming under it. That's going to be the link you want. And that'll open up a screen for you to define the system locations. And here you're just going to go ahead and create as many of these as you need. I just did two in the example here, one for finance, one for payroll. And you're going to also give it a location field, and that's going to generate what the folder is going to be called on the server as well. So no limit to many of these as you want. And once you kind of have these set up, you'll then be able to see additional options when you're running things in the background or creating schedules. So again, these are only available in the batch mode. If you don't use, if you don't flip that switch to run in the background or use a schedule, you're not going to see this option. But once you kind of go into the run options of a report and you turn that on, you'll see an option that says save report as external file if you had this set up correctly so far. And that gives you a drop down here. I kind of highlighted in red where it's set to finance. You can go ahead and pick the folder you want it to go to and then run that report. So do a quick demo here and just kind of show you how all that works. So I have got, where is my remote desktop? Here it is. So this is the server I'm running Cognos on. I got an E drive, my Cognos reports folder, and that finance reports folder here. I'm going to just wipe this out just so we can see it get created. One other thing to note too is I've only have finance listed here, but in my deck, you can see I've got a payroll folder here as well. These folders get generated on demand. So until I actually run something that's going to write there, these won't get created. So if you get concerned, hey, I created all these folders, I don't see them here yet, it's most likely because you haven't run anything yet. So let me run my burst demo. And this is just a really basic report. And you don't have to use bursting. You can just be, a file that you run every single day. But I like the burst aspect because you can kind of create specific versions of a single report. So again, I'm going to go ahead, use the run as, run in the background. I'm going to create PDFs. And I want to turn on bursting. And then for my delivery, because I've got that external file setup going on, I can click that. And I can go now and define where I want it to go. And I'm going to put it in the finance folder. And you got some other options. Do you want to replace existing versions, keep existing files? You can add a timestamp or a sequence number. I like the timestamp, kind of tells me when it was built, when it was run. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit run. I think it's pretty quick. And this just runs, a sample output from the Great Outdoors sample database from Cognos. And hopefully that should populate. It's starting to run now. So I'm getting all these files generated. And each one of these is unique for a country. I had a page break and burst on country. So if I'm a sales rep from Belgium, I can come in here, look at my Belgium version. Hopefully I have Adobe. Okay. And here's just my country. And here's my, camping equipment, golf equipment numbers for the year. So this can be run daily, weekly, monthly, as needed when you're in this example, your sales rep needs that information. And I've now eliminated that person to even have to come into Cognos, log in, take up a concurrent user spot in my environment. They don't have to go and click through the reports to find the report, run the report, wait for it to come back, generate the PDF. It's all just here waiting for them. So this is a huge time saver. And if you've got, a Cognos environment that's just slammed all the day, if you have the opportunity that people don't necessarily need to, they're just running the same report every day, you can generate that ahead of time before people start getting online, put it into a folder, especially if you have like map network drives, create folders that have these Cognos reports and people just go and get them right there. You don't have to go and get it in Cognos, and it's going to make your Cognos environment that much more available for other types of tasks and reporting that may be taking up a lot of your resources. So again, really easy to set these up, really powerful feature. If you're not using these, I would definitely recommend looking into them and exploring this capability. Just a couple of the next steps too. Again, I mentioned, you can take it even beyond this. You can set up scripts to move them to SharePoint. You can SFTP them to other locations. Pretty much anything you can think of with just some batch commands or some scripting tools. You can move these reports and do different things with them. There is also in some of the later versions of Cognos, I don't remember which one specifically, I think 11.1 somewhere, they introduced some of the cloud storage options. I've only used the Amazon S3, if you're not familiar with, it's sort of like an online storage folder that Amazon AWS hosts. But if you have one of those, you can set it up and write directly to there. And again, if you got people who are outside of your network, you can expose that Amazon S3 storage location, and they can go and get things externally. So if you have external customers, who you don't want them logging into your system and trying to get these local files, you can go and use an Amazon S3 bucket and have it written right there directly. So kind of lots of different options. I haven't used the IBM Cloud Object Storage or this other yet, but I think they're continuing to add these different features here. So just another way to kind of expand on the bursting to local files. Next feature is multiple gateways. Again, nothing unique to Cognos 12 here either, but another thing that I notice a lot of people don't take advantage of that I think is a useful tool. Essentially what this does is allows you to create a landing page for each namespace. So if you only have one namespace, everyone in your organization just logs in Active Directory, this probably isn't super irrelevant or important to you, but if you've got multiple types of users, external users, or there's different companies that have been merged into one and you have all different namespaces, it's the default Cognos interface is going to have a single gateway, and you're going to go and log in, and it's going to ask you to pick which one you want to log into, and then you have to again log in from that screen. This is going to default it to a specific namespace. It's already been pre-populated with that dropdown, and it just hides the existence of other users, other groups to users. And you can also continue to keep this sort of standard one for an administrator. So if you're an administrator and you have to kind of go into different namespaces and control users and groups and access and things like that, you probably do want to keep this, but it's a little bit more of an elegant solution to kind of have individual gateways installed that are mapped to specific namespaces. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And it's pretty simple. Again, is you're just going to install the Cognos server software. So go ahead and run the installer. If you've done an install, you've probably seen these screens, but we're going to create a new directory. So I've already got sort of in my E program files, IBM Cognos Analytics, I've got that analytics directory is already in use. That's my main server, which also includes all three tiers. It's got a content tier, application tier, gateway tier. I'm going to spin up another installation directory and just call it Gateway 1, which I picked for this. But if you've got specific namespaces, it's going to be probably more helpful to name it that. So if you've got Active Directory or LDAP or external users, kind of give it a more friendly name here so you know which one is which. And then when you're also creating it, give it a new shortcut folder name as well, so it doesn't get mixed up with the current one you have. Then you're going to have two Cognos configurations. You're not going to know which one's which. So give these unique names in the install location in the shortcut folder, and make sure, again, you're just installing only the gateway. You don't need the app tier, the content tier. So it should be a pretty small, lightweight installation. Next step is to run that IIS alias script. And if you haven't attended my webinars or you're not aware of this, this is probably the greatest thing to happen to Cognos in the history of Cognos, especially since Cognos 11 came out and the IIS rules got a lot more complicated. In the Cognos 10 days, it would just took a couple of seconds to create some virtual directories. But early days of Cognos 11.0, there was like a 10-page IIS setup script where you had to manually type in all these different patterns. Now you just kind of open up this text file. It's in your, I believe it's in the installation directory, CGI bin templates IIS. And once you're there, you just open this file and you kind of need to edit two places. One is your new alias. What are users going to log into? And what's the URL they're going to use when they want to hit this new gateway? So I just kind of map it to the existing directory, but I would recommend something more user-friendly that users are going to make sense to them. So I just did IBM Cognos _G1, and then make sure that the path that this script is pointing to is also tied to that GW1 folder. And go ahead and run it. It's going to validate everything and everything looks good. Hit yes, it'll create all those directories for you, which saves you a ton of time and avoids any kind of fat finger errors. And then next step is you're going to have a new Cognos configuration available for this gateway. And the gateway alone is much, much simpler, much more simplistic than the full, server configuration where I've got, 25, 30 different subtabs here on the left in a standard server. The gateway, I've only got about 4 or 5. And out of those, I only need to worry about environment and basically just setting the dispatcher URI here. And the most important step is to map this gateway namespace. So every instance of Cognos, you can define a gateway namespace. So if you do leave this blank, it's just going to prompt you to pick a namespace. So we're going to hard code it in here. So I've got an OpenDJ LDAP instance set up here. I'm going to define this new GW1 to map directly to OpenDJ. So I'm going to put that value right in here. And it is case sensitive and very, specific. So if you have a typo or something, it's not going to work. So make sure you're copying it exactly as it's typed in the main content manager configuration where you define the namespace. Go ahead and then save that and generate your cryptographic keys. And then the last step is to make one tweak to IIS. And IIS, again, it's going to have all those URL rewrite rules, which get really messy. It's all been done for you. So this is going to do 99% of that for you, but you still need to go in and edit under your BI, the URL rewrite rules. Your header variable needs to have a HTTP cam _ namespace value variable and set that value to OpenDJ here as well. So if you have this set and this set here, then you are able to get this sort of custom landing page. So again, this is my sort of sample here. Let me log out. I got a default here. So I've got multiple namespaces I have to pick. And sometimes, these cryptic users don't know what to pick, especially if, you're using like something like I've got Azure AD, I've got 2 different ones, OpenDJ. If I didn't know Cognos or what I was logging into, I would be confused as a user. So I want to have it so it defaults as OpenDJ. So I'm going to remove this URL and switch it now to GW1. And now it's going to just automatically ask me for my OpenDJ ID. So again, really easy to set this up. And if you've got multiple namespaces, it's just, I think, a more elegant solution and makes it a little nicer. You can customize the landing page a little bit too and give people a different look and feel if you're into that. But super easy thing to set up. And I'd recommend if you've got multiple namespaces, definitely something that, is worth the small amount of time to set up. Next feature is default parameters. So this one is brand new, Cognos 12 only. So if you don't have Cognos 12, this is something you can look forward to. If you do have it, you can start taking advantage of this now. This is something I have wanted in Cognos for probably 20 years since I started working with it or so. I've had requirements where, a customer said, hey, I want you to, put a date prompt on this report, and I want it to show always show the first of the month to the last of the month. And obviously, different months that you're in have different start and end dates. Some months have 31 days, 30 days, 28 days, things like that. And, when you move to a new month, how do you know what to do? And I've always had to kind of use a bunch of JavaScript hacks and put HTML items in there and try to make these things work. And they were never very, very useful. And maybe I could make it work, but there was new versions of Cognos would break it or this or that. So this is something they finally added, which is amazing. You can now use a lot of the Cognos functionality, like those date functions and query items and things like that, to actually set default parameters in Cognos. So I'm going to do 2 examples. The first one is just some date logic. We can use functions like the first of the month, last of the month, yesterday relative time functions. And the other example is going to be, I've got just a pick list, but I always wanted to default to the top customer. And obviously, if I hard code that, that top customer might not be the top customer next month or after the next sales report, something like that. So we're going to have it use a dynamic top customer field to kind of pick that. So the first thing to note is that, Cognos 12 now gives you a whole new sort of window or explorer. I think they were called explorers in the old day. You had a report, query, prompt explorer, things like that. There's something called parameters now that you can use these breadcrumbs and jump right to parameters. And in that screen, the first page that it defaults to is also very useful. It kind of shows you all the parameters that it found in your report. So for my one example here, I found 3 different parameters: country, order method, product line. It tells you what the type is. Are they required? Is it a multi-select? You can actually click the button. This hyperlink here will take you right to the location where it is. And this is nice on its own just because I've had massive reports with huge prompt pages. Some of them are hidden. Sometimes they're buried in conditional blocks. They can be a pain to find. So this makes it really easy to kind of get a full inventory of what you have as far as parameters and get right to it. But we're actually going to focus more on this default values and setting those. So in here, I've got the ability to do different things. I can use report expression logic. So I'm going to do one here where I kind of use things like first of the month, adding years, and things like that you probably use if you had to manipulate some dates. And I'm going to be able to just pull a value from a query and use that to drive the default value. These are things that are new that you couldn't do in the past. So let me jump to the live demo now and log in here. And I've got a couple samples here. So parameter demo. So let me do the date one first. Let me edit this. About parameters. Click, just take them out and show you what it looks like before I do this. So again, parameters is new here. I can go into here. I'm going to remove these and then just kind of show you what happens. So if I run this right now, let me clear the parameters. It should, the standard sort of prompt functionality is just going to show us today's date. So it just puts April 11th in there. And I'd have to, user have to go in and set this, which again, not the end of the world, but you have lots of prompts, it becomes very cumbersome. Also, if you're developing and testing on reports, you're having to change this every single time you make a change or want to test something. It just drives me nuts sometimes. So without having to manually hard code these in, we're able to use some of these new parameter mappings. So in here, I can go in and I can create different types of string parameters, date parameters. So I've got a date parameter here. And you can define, which one you want it to be. You can also click here and say, new date parameter, pick the parameter that it finds on the page and set it up here. So I've got a start and an end date parameter, and I can go and create some default values. So I wanted to not actually pull this from a query, just use time in general. So I'm creating a report expression. And this is really, really old, the Great Outdoors or Go Sales warehouse data. So the last record in there, I think, is from like 13 years ago, sometime in like 2010 or 11. So I had to do an add years minus 13 to kind of go back 13 years. But then I wanted to grab the first of the month. So essentially, you should take the first of the month from 2011 of the current month we're in. So it should be 4/1/2011. And I basically did the same thing with the last of the month on today's report date. So again, I should get that first and last date. So again, I'm going to run this now, the new version with the default parameters. And now it's defaulting to the values I want. So obviously, this is just sort of scratching the surface of what you do. You can build crazy complex report expressions in there to do whatever you need. I'm just doing some dates here, but if you wanted to do, first Sunday of the third Sunday of the month, you can now actually build things like that if you've got the requirements or requests to do that. The sky's the limit. You can kind of do whatever you want, and I can run this report, and it's going to go ahead and run it from April through the 30th, just like this. So I personally, really like these. I'm excited to kind of build out more complicated things with them, but this I think is a really, really nice feature, long overdue. So awesome to have here. And then the other topic was the top country. So let me go in here and just show you what the default of this one looks like without the parameters. So here I've got one called country. I'm just going to take that out. And okay, no parameters. Okay, and I'm going to run this. And this is just like a visualization and a pick list that shows like the product revenue by country. So the first thing that does is, it's kind of annoying, is if you have a require prompt, before I even see the output, I have to pick a country. So I know nothing about the report. I don't know which one's going to be the top country. I'll pick Germany and hit OK. And I was close, but not quite. So Germany is sort of a little above average, 182 million. Switzerland was the top country, I guess, in this report. So, in default, I would like this to always be set to the top when I come in. And again, this could be changing daily, weekly, monthly. So how do I do this without hard coding Switzerland? And again, you couldn't really do it in the past unless you ranked your query that had these, and then you put a JavaScript that would always pick the first list. That's sort of how I had to do it in the past, which wasn't a very elegant solution, but it worked sometimes. But this is going to be much more sophisticated. I can do, this based on the query itself. So I'm going to go back to my report. I'm going to undo and bring back my parameters. So this one, again, on my country parameter, I'm going to bring in a query related one. So I've got a query called country, and I've got the revenue in there. So I want to focus on revenue, bring back the top row, and I want to have it driven on the country, and I want to have it display the value, which is that prompt page. It's the concatenation of the country and the revenue to combine. So display that. So now if I turn this on, make sure I don't have anything saved in the parameters, and go ahead and run it. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to bypass that initial prompting, which I don't like anyway. And it's going to default to Switzerland. So now it knows to always use this. And if I was to change the numbers here to something else, it would bubble up and say Singapore. I change it to quantity, and have it driven off that. And Singapore was number one in quantity. Singapore would now automatically be the number one pick on the list. So again, just sort of very basic example here, but hopefully you can kind of see the capabilities and the potential of what you could do. And again, this is a really nice feature, I think. So if you have any questions or thoughts around this, definitely reach out and we can look a little bit deeper. But I just wanted to share some of the capabilities and just highlight this as one of the nicest new features in Cognos 12.
Todd, I'm going to jump in there real quick. If anybody does want to talk to us about any of these things, I'm going to put a Calendly link into the chat window for you. You can get on our calendar for a small, brief meeting. Also, there's been about 10 questions coming through. As soon as Todd gets through the demo, I'm going to have him take a look at these questions, and we'll try to get through as many of them as we can. What we can't get through will be on the website. Thanks, Todd.
Sure. All right, I'm going to jump back into the deck here. Went through that. Okay, we're talking about the replacements for query and analysis studio. I know this was a big one. It seemed like from the polls, there was a lot of people hesitant to move to Cognos 12 just because of the limitations of the removal of these tools, and even more so, even 11.2.4. You were limited. IE was killed off in 11.2.4, so now you have to use Firefox essentially to get to those tools. So what is the best way to move forward if you're reliant on Query and Analysis Studio? So a couple different options. Again, this is not going to be an exact one-to-one replacement for the tool. I mean, it was very custom made for just simplicity and ease of use. So a lot of the things that are in the reporting tool are a bit overwhelming, especially to the users who have been using these older Analysis Studio, Query Studio tools for a while. But the good news is you can kind of simplify it a bit. So there's a couple of default settings I would say that I usually recommend, for this type of user, and you could just create like a basic one pager, or send something out to the users when you do migrate to kind of have them make sure these settings are on. So the first set is things to disable, and there's two here that I recommend that you disable. One is the show new data container dialog, and the other is the guided report layout. Let me kind of show you what those are if you're not familiar with them. So I'm going to do a new report. I'll just pick a blank template. So if I click this and say I want a list, looks like I have it turned off already. So let me turn them on and show you. So that new data container and guided layout. Okay, these are the ones I recommend you turn off. So with these on, if a user says, oh, I want to create, just a basic list, the first thing it's going to do is say, give it a name and pick a query. And this alone may throw people off already. They're like, I don't know what these queries are, and why is it query one? And maybe there's another query in there and they get confused and they're pointing things to the wrong thing. So just remove all of this from the equation. You can either check it here and it won't go anymore, or I recommend just kind of coming in here once and setting all these options at once. Just turn this new data container dialog off. The other one is just the layout guided reference. So I'm old school, as I'm used to just dragging things on the screen and having them kind of stack up. And if I need to make things in a table, I'll use a table. But if I wanted to add a cross tab now, I would normally just drag it here, but now it's creating a table over here. And I'm like, I don't want it to go underneath. I don't want it to go under. And it's doing all these tables automatically for me. And I'm much more of a manual, hands-on person when it comes to this kind of stuff. So maybe your users like this. I think it's confusing. So again, I recommend if I just undo these real quick, if you turn that off under options, report, guided report layout, then you get back to sort of the way I'm used to doing it, is having things go like that. And if I wanted a table, then I can just drag a table over and do it this way, old fashioned. So again, my personal preference, I think it's easier to do it this way. But I think it's just a more simple, less confusing way to do it. So that's personal preference. And then more importantly, page preview. So again, if you use those tools, you're not going to understand, or maybe you're like dragging things onto the screen, like, why am I not seeing any of my data? Like, I don't know why it's not working. They don't know there's a play button up here, or they don't know about these. So obviously you can change it to page preview here, but you can also set the default as well here. So by default, everyone who comes in, it sets the page design, have them set it to page preview. If you're a developer and you're working, with complex reports, you probably don't want it to default to page preview, because I know like it takes forever to bring back a couple of rows sometimes, and you need to make a bunch of changes before you want to see that data. So you probably don't want to set it for everybody, but if you have your, the users who are coming over from those tools like Query Studio and Analysis Studio, have them set this to page preview. It's going to give them more of that experience that they're used to. So let me just delete these and package selected. Let's just do go sales query. So if you haven't used page preview, it's just going to be exactly like what you're used to. As soon as you drag it over and let go, it's going to actually run the query. And this should look pretty similar to, what users have seen in the past with Query Studio, just dragging things over, and it instantly gives you results back. So those are two things that I would recommend changing in the options. And then for Analysis Studio, since you're working with multidimensional data, the way it works with this out of the box, again, is very confusing and not intuitive for users. So there's a couple settings here. One is to make sure you have the box checked to show members only for dimensional packages, to make sure you have create sets when you insert, and to insert the children under the member insert options. So these are all underneath this sort of gear icon. Let me bring in a cube. Let me do a new report. New report. And I know I've got a cube somewhere. This is a cube. So I get this gear icon. So the first thing you'll see is, if I try to, let's just drop a crosstab on here. If I would say, okay, let me see, I want to see my products, and they expand this, they expect to see, oh, I have it turned on. Let me disable it. Yes, this is, I think the default is this, with this not checked and this not turned on. So if I came in and said, okay, let me see my products, they see, oh, what's that? And then product line, why are these not showing me the actual members? It's confusing. So to make it look just like you would see in Analysis Studio, just turn that on, And I recommend turning this on. And now I see the actual members instead of those levels that are confusing to anyone outside of developers. So I can also have it, when I drag it in, it's going to bring me the children in. So I drag products, I get my products underneath there. If I drag in my years, get that, measures. So again, this should be pretty similar to the experience in Analysis Studio. Again, not exactly. You've also got these page layers and context filters here. So again, if I want to see just the sales region in America, I can drag that up here. This is all, pretty darn close to what you had in Analysis Studio. And these are, interactive. I can change it to Northern Europe and numbers instantly reflect because I've got page preview on. So this should be, something that the majority of users can at least start with. It gets a little bit confusing with some of the buttons up here, and there's some bit of a learning curve. But again, things like filtering, you've also got this button here called Explore, and they kind of buried a lot of the capabilities like the drilling and the nesting and expanding are all in here. So if I wanted to see, camping equipment and golf equipment, the next level's down, I can go and create the next level down, and it's going to bump it out like that. Same thing for my years, just click on this Explore button and getting familiar with what these do, excluding, creating, replacing, next level down. I'm instantly able to do these. These are also interactive links, so they all drill, things like that. So for the most part, pretty comparable. What gets confusing is just all the extra distractions and things that they may not know how to use or want to know how to use. So again, like I've got multiple queries, prompt pages, variables. These are all things that, for the most part, a Query Studio user, Analysis Studio would never use. I think Query Studio and Analysis Studio were tied to, you all could have one query and you didn't have, anything really complex in there like variables or things like that. So you can strip down this UI a bit as well. And this is, again, nothing new to Cognos 12. They introduced this, I want to say like 11.07-ish when they kind of created some extensions and some customizations. But I would recommend, if you've got a group of users that you want to, start migrating into an environment that, lost Query Studio, Analysis Studio, create a new role in the Cognos namespace. I just created one called QS/AS users, and then put your users in that group. And then you can go into this customization area and the features. There's a million things in here, and you can get pretty detailed. It doesn't have every single thing. Unfortunately, like this on-demand toolbar is all or nothing. So you can't hide pieces of this. So unfortunately, if you said, I don't want them to be able to suppress, or I don't want them to, use the style dropper or something like that for some reason, you can't get down that level of granularity. It's either all or nothing with this. So I'd recommend you leave it on because it does have a lot of useful features like sorting and filtering and cutting and pasting. But you can get into the report specifics. So I can go in all those areas I was just talking about, here, pages, prompt pages, queries, classes, variables, parameters. I can take away or hide all of those. So I can uncheck these boxes and really simplify the tool so they don't get themselves into trouble or start going in places where they don't need to go. So for example, I created another user ID that has the same experience. Let me log out. Oops. And let's see the user.1. Okay, so this user should be in, yeah, they're in the QSAS user group. So now if I go and create a new report, I click here, I've only got page 1 and report. I can't get to those other areas. I've already kind of tweaked this so that it doesn't prompt me. I've got my model. And it's set to, the way I want. So again, all in page preview. So this is going to be, pretty close and pretty well suited to, handle the needs and the simplicity of what Query Studio Analysis users had in the past. I mean, obviously there's some minor features and functionality that aren't there, especially with Query Studio. Let me bring the relational package in. The filtering is one that I know is a big one. I really like the way that Query Studio would kind of have a hyperlink and show you, here's what you picked. You picked fiscal year 2012 and 2013. And if you want to click on that link, it opens up the prompt, the filter parameter page, and lets you, modify that. That's gone to a degree, but again, you could still do a lot of that. So let me just create something real quick. Open this guy. If I do, let's do product line and quantity, order method. So if I wanted to filter on this, I can use this on-demand toolbar, which works great. So I mean, there's just a little bit of a difference when just saying open the filter prompt. Now if I have something directly connected like email, I select it. I can say include or exclude email, or I can do create custom filter. And that's going to give the user sort of what they're used to, this sort of quick launch pop-up window. And I can pick, I only want to see, faxes, and hit OK. So now, here I can see fax was applied because I only see fax. But if I didn't have this in my query, I wouldn't know what was picked here. So you can go and say insert filter text, and now it's going to show you what was picked here. And if I had another field in here, like let's do retailer country in here, just do region, something like that. Create another filter, include Americas. They all start to pile up here, so I can see exactly what's being filtered, whether or not it's in the query itself. So that was something that Query Studio did automatically. Here you have to go and turn this insert filter text on. And then they also, hey, I picked fax, but I really wanted email. I can't just click this. I have to go to click on the object, click on the filter, edit filters. And then if I just double click this here, it opens it up. So again, not as intuitive, not as easy to use. Does require a little bit of a learning curve, but you can get to these same screens, and I can just quickly change that to email, hit OK, OK again, updates the email, updates this result. So I know people are looking for like a perfect replacement. It's not necessarily a perfect solution, but I think with a little bit of training, a little bit of, time spent just getting used to it, it is a good solution to kind of fill that gap. And besides, the missing, the simplicity of it, you do get a lot more out of it. You can do a lot more. You can get, newer visualizations. You can have access to all these properties, things that you couldn't do in Query Studio. So you're getting more, and it's just a little bit of a time investment on the user's part before they can get comfortable with it. But I do believe, for the most part, any kind of use case you may have had that, people said, oh, I have to have this in Analysis Studio. You can do it here. It just be a little bit of a different way to do it. Outside of that, one last slide there is a bulk converter. If you have the access to the installation directory, it's sort of buried here. I always forget where it is. It's in the SDK folder. And there's a folder called bulk converter. And it's just a really small batch file that you run. I think it pops up a little Java window, and it asks you, what's the dispatcher and the gateway. And then you sign in with an administrator account, and you'll get access to the entire team content folder. And you can scan and say, find and convert all Query Studio and Analysis Studio reports, and it's going to go ahead and just bulk convert them for you. It works pretty quick, pretty fast. It does archive the old version, so it'll create a folder with the I think either the original version, or it creates a folder with a new version in it. So it doesn't delete anything. You keep all the old Query Studios, and it creates a new version in the report spec in a new folder, and then you can go and make sure everything looks good. And if it does, then you can swap them out, delete the old ones, replace the new ones, or however you want to manage it. But this can get you converted really quickly. So that need to have access to those old files is then removed. Users are getting trained in how to use the new tool and how to simplify that UI. And it should be, a good way to move forward. So that's all I had. That's the end of the demo, and I'm going to turn it back to Pat for a minute, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. I'm going to make sure we have enough time for Q&A. So, Todd, if you want to start taking a look at that Q&A panel, start at the top. Hey, you saw a lot here today. We're here to help you. We're here to get you upgraded, help you set these things up. We've got support to fit your needs, end-to-end implementation, quick start, mentoring. Please go to senturus.com/cognos-upgrade, and we can help you take care of that. We also have additional services. If you've got performance issues, if you've got stability issues, you need to set up new data sources, new namespaces, new dispatchers, report development, we've got it. We've got over 20 years of doing this. We've got you handled. Okay. Upcoming events, May 9th, Cognos Power BI. May 22nd, that's going to be with me, I think. Microsoft Power Automate. July 18th, drag and drop Cognos data into Power BI or Tableau. And then always on demand, we have Cognos Analytics performance tuning tips. Now I'm going to stop there and I'm going to go ahead and let Todd start answering some of those questions, and then we'll finish up in a couple minutes. So Todd, if you want to take like 5 minutes and go ahead and start answering some of those questions.
Sure. Just gonna kind of go through an order here. Question from Goran. Regarding bursting reports to file system, is it possible to exclude generation of HTML files? I'll have to check and see. I know it does create, let me see if I still have it open, just some extra stuff in there. Like these MHT files I think you're talking about, or the XML files.
The XML, actually, Goran had a second question about 6 down. It looks like they were looking for the exclusion of the XML, not the HTML.
Yeah, I think I saw somewhere, it's been a while, but I think there's some kind of advanced setting you can place somewhere in the batch service to have it exclude that. Outside of that, the easiest thing to do if you don't do it in Cognos is just have that a batch script that just goes and does a bulk mass delete of anything, dot XML or MHT. But I believe I did see there's a way to do it in Cognos. If I can find it, I'll post it. We'll do this Q&A blog post up on the web once we're done. So if I can find that link. Sometimes those advanced settings are hidden. They're difficult to track down, but they do exist. So I'll try to share that if possible. Let's see. Can you make use of Windows drives with the Linux Cognos setup? I believe you can. I haven't tried it, but I know. I think you have the ability to do Windows to Linux and Linux to Windows. Again, I'll have to double check and confirm that. Another question, can you remove the en.us from the file extension? That's another one of those things. I know there's an advanced setting somewhere that lets you remove that. I'll have to double check and see where it is. But again, worst case is, again, those batch files, very easy to do quick renaming as well. Question on the licensing. What license needed to use reports file system? No extra license is used. I don't know if they still, I'm not a licensing expert. I don't know if they still have that information distribution license type and if that's needed here. I mean, typically you're generating a file and it's not sending it directly to users. So it may be outside of that area. I can check with Carson Bradshaw, who's our licensing expert, and he can probably confirm that, but I'll again put that in the posting of these questions on the website once we get them done. It's possible to control access to the outputs. If only Belgium report could be access to Belgium users. Yes and no. So again, like I just created a folder called finance. If you're going to burst it, all the reports are going to go to that folder with different pieces of it. This is where it gets into that, sort of advanced step 2 things I mentioned in one of the slides, batch scripting, things like that are going to be your friend here if you need to kind of lock those down. So then you could create, finance and subfolders for each country and have the script, once it gets written, instantly move them into those folders, and those folders are then secured with, Windows security or whatever it is you're using. But as far as the bursting, I don't believe it can go and create a unique secured version of each one automatically. I know you can, the PDFs can have a password, but I don't think it's going to be, country specific. So if you can password protect your PDFs in Cognos, which is something I just recently discovered, which is kind of cool, but yeah, it's going to be sort of just one for all, not country specific. Let's see, what else do we got here? Would this be usable to use one gateway for test and one for prod environments instead of 2? One per environment. No, so there's within the gateway setting, you have to point it to a dispatcher, so that it's going to be unique to that environment. So one environment can have multiple gateways, but one gateway can't have multiple environments, if that makes sense. So you couldn't use it for multiples. I mean, you could use the same server, install two different gateways and have each configuration pointing to a unique Cognos environment. So you type in IBM Cognos test and IBM Cognos prod, and there are different aliases that are configured to go to different dispatchers. That would work, but you couldn't have different environments with the same alias going to the same one. Another question about the bursting files. Talked about that. Someone asked, what is a namespace? So a namespace is what you use to set up Cognos to open up Cognos config here. How you authenticate your users. So when users log in, assuming you have some kind of security enabled, you have options to say Active Directory, LDAP. You can use custom Java. Then there's all the OpenID Connect ones, which are new, which use things like Salesforce, Okta, Azure ADFS, things like that. So you're going to define, how those authentication methods work. And then when users log in, the default behavior of Cognos is to say, okay, you have 5 different namespaces available. Which one do you want to pick? And unless it can be confusing to users. They see all these cryptic things like Okta, AD, LDAP, and unless you're the one who set it up, it may not be obvious to users which one to pick. So that's where sort of having that custom gateway comes into play. You just don't need to know. It just automatically defaults them because they're using that URL that's mapped to it. So here, once this loads, I don't know why is it taking so long. But you can go into authentication, right click and create a new namespace. A namespace is just the terminology that Cognos uses to define new namespace. I've got all of these: Active Directory, custom Java, Cognos Series 7, which is still out there amazingly. Different types of LDAPs, SiteMinder, SAP, and within, where's OpenID? This must be an old version. I don't know what this config is, but that's the gist of it. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and thank you all for your questions. We will post the answers to these questions on the website so that everybody can take a look at these. Thank you all. Hey, speaking of the website, we want you to come on there, senturus.com/resources. We've got insider viewpoints. We've got reviews. We've got technical tips. We've got everything you could want on there, including more demos of this stuff. As you can see here at Senturus, we can help you handle everything modern BI, accelerated and accessible, whether it's content ownership, training, performance, data culture. Some of you mentioned early on that your issues with upgrading had to do with political, had to do with things along those lines. We can help you with that. We can help you figure out how to navigate those with things like governance and security and how to change the data culture in your organization. As you can see, 23 years, 1,400 clients, 3,000 projects. Some of you even on here are some of these logos. We thank you all. And as you can see here, we've got all sorts of different areas that we specialize in, whether it's retail, finance, no matter what, we can help you out. Again, if your issue is bigger than what we've covered today, you can email us at info@senturus.com. You can get on our calendar. I will put that Calendly link in there one more time for you. Set up a meeting, get on the calendar for 30 minutes, and we can talk through and help you out with a free consultation. We will also post all of the answers to the Q&A on our website within the next day or two. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Here you've got our information, our phone number, our email, our website, our LinkedIn. Thank you, Todd, for a great presentation. Thank you all for attending. We appreciate all of you. Anything you'd like to say on the end here, Todd?
No, thanks for the great questions and turnout today. And I think you covered it, Pat. Reach out if you have any questions or need some help.
Thank you all. Well, like I say, we will go ahead and we will have all of these questions available available for answers in the next day or two. Thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day.